In three, two, one. Lew Kimble is on the podcast today, and Lew has one of the most impressive corporate executive careers that I've ever come across. Lew is the former executive vice president and CEO of the famous sports shoe company FootLocker. Not only has he served as executive vice president and CEO of FootLocker International, he's also served as executive vice president and CEO of FootLocker Asia and Pacific, FootLocker Europe, vice president of the real estate division of FootLocker Europe, vice president of operations FootLocker Kids Florida USA, director of European Sporting Goods Association, and director of Australian Sporting Goods Association. Lew started his career with FootLocker just 2 years after the company was founded in 1974 and has been with the company for over 40 years. FootLocker now operates in 28 countries around the world and is actually a successor company to the FW Woolworth Company that was established in 1879. FootLocker now has over 3,300 mall-based stores globally. One of the reasons I wanted to have Lew on the show is because he thinks like an entrepreneur. Lew put FootLocker on an entrepreneurial strategy for growth, acting like a startup in a mature buying environment with high expectations. Lew has a strong record of proven results on 4 continents. His leadership ability has allowed him to create and track record of turning around underperforming businesses and delivering long-term growth. And he's on the podcast today. Lew, how you doing, my friend?
Very good, Chris. Yeah, thanks for that very, wonderful introduction there from that standpoint. So I'll have to bring you along with me more often from that standpoint.
I could be your official intro man for any speaking
there
gigs you have, right?
There you go. So yeah.
Yeah. Before we start off, we've got a fun question from one member of the audience, and I've got to throw it out. He's lived in Asia quite a bit, and he wanted to ask you. Is why is it so hard to find a shoe over the size of 10 in Asia?
That's a good. Yeah. Well, again, I think that the reality is from a product distribution standpoint, you cater your size runs towards the size of what you think is the core sizes of the marketplace. But I could tell him, depending on where he is in Asia, the consumer base is readily expanding. No different than the United States. You have most of your major markets, whether you're talking Singapore or Hong Kong or Seoul, or Tokyo, are becoming melting pots just like the United States. So I think you're gonna see more and more of a push out of upper ends of the sizes and lower end. So even on the apparel side, he's right. You would have a hard time finding if you're a big guy looking for a double extra large somewhere in Asia as well too from that standpoint. But again, I think that's changing from that standpoint. A lot of that by China as well. So.
Yeah, it makes sense. I was in Thailand a couple years back and I ordered a pizza from Pizza Hut and it was a medium. And it came as, you remember those small personal pan pizzas with 4 pieces, and they were like, that's a medium here in Thailand, and I was like, this is a personal pan. This is 4 pieces. I paid $20 for it. I was furious, but they were like, no, welcome to Thailand, and so I get it, yeah, but you have one of the most incredible careers as a corporate executive at a corporate executive level that I've ever seen. And it'd probably be fair to say that would it be fair to say that you know FootLocker better than almost anyone alive?
At this stage, yes, probably. There aren't too many of us that go back to those early days when the company was first founded from that standpoint. So I mean, I actually made my original switch over in the early 80s, because you're right, FootLocker started in 1974 in Puente Hills. I had started in 76, but actually with Kinney Shoes, which was part of our one of the other divisions within the FW Woolworth chain. But I made the move over early against the advice of all my mentors within the Kinney company, who said, hey, that athletic thing's just not going to work. Why are you leaving? So.
Well, you had the foresight. What was your first job with FootLocker?
I actually started on the sales floor. So I started as a management trainee. So from that standpoint, because if you wanted to come up through the field organization, that's where you started. And interestingly, I had done even back in those days, my research, and the FW Woolworth Company had a history of promoting from the store team or the operations team in the business. So if you wanted to eventually become a division president, and even the CEO of Woolworth for multiple years, even going before we went to the outside for the first one, always came up to the sales team. So you kind of went from stores, district manager, regional vice president, VP level within the operations. And then that was like the number 2 job back then. That's changed now, as most companies have now look across the entire executive pool. So whether you're in, a merchant role, a marketing role, an IT role, whatever it is. So, I mean, now we obviously look for everything. But back in those days, if you really wanted, if you had an aspiration to eventually be the guy in the big chair or the woman in the big chair, you needed to start in the field team, so in the store team.
There's so few people these days that stay with one company that long, even 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, what was it about FootLocker that you enjoyed so much that kept you there?
Yeah, I think the opportunity I had was because of all the different roles I played. I mean, I never would have probably stayed that long. I mean, I think like most people, rather, if you're successful, there's always somebody knocking on the door, or send me an email or whatever. But it's the variety of roles. I mean, between the store team, the moves internationally were a huge game changer in my career. Taking on the real estate role for a period of time, and then actually leading the division, so being the managing director down under in Australia, and then the president of FootLocker Europe. So, if it wasn't for that constant change of opportunities, then yeah, I think you would have looked to go somewhere else. I mean, you could have taken if you said, hey, I'm interested in real estate, or I'm potentially interested in some other part of finance or some other part of business, you would have gone somewhere else. But fortunately for me, those doors always opened up for me.
Yeah, you changed so many roles throughout that time period, and given it was 40 years, but was that because you were just interested in different divisions and you thought you could help them grow, and it did it excite you to change roles that often?
Yeah, it did. But I think, and it's interesting because I have a chance to talk to, sometimes to college audiences, or to younger executives, and people say, well, what was the biggest influencing event in your life that got you to where you are? And by far, it was when we made a decision as a family, because obviously your family makes that decision as well. To go to Europe in the early 90s, to physically move to Europe. I mean, I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. None of my family ever lived or worked outside the U.S. In fact, I don't think most of them even traveled abroad, let alone move. But Foot Locker happened to purchase what became the core of Foot Locker Europe back in 1992, and they asked a group of us to work on an exchange program for a couple of years to try to put the Foot Locker values and culture into this new organization. And after going back and forth for a couple of years, I was offered a role over there as the VP of the store team, so the VP of operations, the person in charge of the sales team. Again, the number two in our echelon, and that move changed everything for me, because I think I think most of us Americans, even if we're the most humble of Americans, we kind of believe that the sun rises and sets in the United States, and the world rotates a little bit around us.
Uh-huh.
But you go over there and it's a whole different thing. I mean, from that standpoint, I mean, I think I learned from the people that work for me. I mean, let's be honest, they teach you as much as you teach them. I memean, things like diversity and inclusion were a big part of growing in Europe long before they became buzzwords in the US. I mean, even in the startup days, we were at 7 or 8 countries in Europe and quickly went to 13. And it's a whole different experience when you're leading teams, not only in those days potentially language challenged, but it's a huge difference. I mean, let's say the U.S. isn't the same. I mean, if you're based in New York talking to somebody based in Texas, you might have a little bit of a cultural difference. But when you cross, trying to convince a Frenchman to do what you want him to do versus a German versus a Spaniard versus an Italian, and just the differences in culture, and who's relaxed and easygoing, and I'll get to it when I can, and who potentially marches in the direction you send them until they go off a cliff, unless you go back and make sure that they realize they need to stop occasionally. So, but yeah, to me that was the biggest change, because it really repositioned all my, up until that point, anything I thought was important to be a successful retailer. It really monumentally shifted me, and I think that experience allowed me to really grow within the company and to take on the other higher level international roles that I had an opportunity to do.
Can you elaborate more, Lou, on kind of the leadership skills that you learned and had to apply while being abroad with those different cultures? Because a lot of our listeners, like myself, I've lived abroad 9 years, a lot of time in Europe, a lot of time in South America, a lot of time in Asia, right? And I'm a bootstrap entrepreneur that can run everything from his laptop. And a lot of our listeners are like that. So I think your experience could help them apply that knowledge to their businesses, because there's still so many people that even if they are they do have remote businesses working from home, they still don't understand that how easy or how some of the skills or how convenient it is to go abroad and live a life and to operate remotely in different cultures and countries. So maybe if you could talk more on those leadership skills.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chris, because back in those days in the '90s, you didn't have Zoom,
Right,
you
right.
didn't have the email appetite that you do today. You had to do a lot of things over the phone. You had to do a lot of things over, a very antiquated system of getting messages to a store for that standpoint, or an executive that's traveling. So, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the first thing is, whether if you're able to control your own destiny, that's great. But for most of us in life, if we're successful, we need a team around us that we can work with, and we also eventually need the consumer, that whoever you're serving from that standpoint, whether the consumer is internal or external. So, my advice is to be a student of your business all the time, and to be humble enough to realize you're going to learn things. So, when I got into Europe, the expectation, and it was interesting because I replaced another American. So there was an American that went into that role when we first bought the company, and the theory was he was going to embed the culture, get everything going, teach the Europeans to be, like FootLocker Americans.
Right.
And he had a very successful career. In fact, actually, he was one of the guys that probably had a little bit to do with shaping what became my executive roles. But he was really undoubtedly, and he would say himself, was a failure for those 2 years, because he just could not get the Europeans on board. And the problem was he was so focused on, we do this way in America. He didn't spend enough time listening. He spent probably way too much time talking. So,
Mm-hmm.
and the different cultures have different mindsets. So if you're a student and you go into the store to talk to the store team, or into a meeting setting in a hotel somewhere with a group of district managers or regional vice presidents, or in the office with the other parts of the business, the other silos that have to support you in the field team, you have to be willing to listen and understand. And then probably take time to, what I did anyway, take time to step away from that initial, okay, let me pull in the information. I still know where I want to go, but let me understand where they're at, what they think, what they don't think, and then go back in a short period of time with how you smooth the message or how you say it. So for example, in France, at those days, and probably still today, you really need to convince the French people that this is their idea and I'm just helping them make it happen. Versus a meeting with the Italians or the Spaniards, which is, hey, look, the fact that you're relaxed, the fact that you're flexible, the fact that you're willing to absorb some of the things we ask, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to do it a little quicker. The timetable needs to move up a little bit. And I think because of the willingness to listen first, I think most leaders, then you can earn the respect that you need for when you then ask them to do something, or you ask your team to accomplish something, they believe in you. And I think that's, to me, that's been one of the fortunate things for me, is I've always been able to earn the respect of my team first, and then be able to ask them what to do. And the people that are, that know me, and there's people that know me for 40 years and know me for 5 years, whatever, they'll say that they've heard me say multiple times. What's important to me is that I've earned your respect and trust. It's not necessarily important to me you like me. Okay, that would be nice, but it's more important that you respect and trust me, so that when we make a decision as a division or as a team, that you execute against that, because that's ultimately how you're going to judge if we're successful or not. If we just talk about it forever, then okay, yeah, it's great, but you need to actually go out and accomplish things. So there was a lot. There was a lot of times I came home and would have kicked the dog or thrown stuff around the yard, thinking, how many times am I going to talk to these people before they understand or follow through?
Uh-huh.
But eventually they do. And you just have to be willing to. When I say take time, I don't mean years. So if you're an entrepreneur and it's your own money, you don't have years to wait to get a return on it. Or if you're part of a big company, you don't have years either. So, and it was funny. That's the last thing, and I'll stop. When I got promoted to go to Europe, I was all excited. Okay, I'm taking my wife, my first wife, and my two sons to Europe. It's going to be a great opportunity for us. We got to grow. And the job I had before I went there, I was based in Manhattan. So again, I was running the store team in the boroughs, but I was, my technically DM office was in the Woolworth building, the seat of the corporate headquarters. So I got called up to the chairman's office, which was Roger Farah, which was like going to see God in those days. So, okay, fine. Whoa. So I went up to see Roger, and Roger said, look, we're really excited about the fact that you're going to go to Europe. We really think you're going to make a difference, but you need to be clear, Lew. If you don't start making money over there, we're going to shut it down. So, okay, dude, again, there has to be a timetable to get things done as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. We've got a question from one of the listeners here, Lew. I'd like to know how Lew got good at team building and what I or other leaders could do to get better at this. So maybe just something on team building for you with your experience.
Yeah. I think first off is when you build a team, you need to make sure you have a diversity in who you're looking at and what roles you expect them to play. You have to be thinking ahead that when the team's assembled, whether it's 4 people or 15 people, how that interaction is going to work. So, I mean, sometimes the focus when we look at teams is functional. So, okay, I need a head of HR, or I want somebody to run my supply chain. But you also need to look at personalities. I think the easiest way to describe it is I'll use birds as an example. So you want to have some eagles. You want to have some people that can that want to lead and want to go, but you can't have the entire team being eagles because that just doesn't work either. Mm-hmm. You need an owl along the way. You probably need a couple peacocks that kind of push the edge of the envelope and make you think about things differently. But so I think when you want to develop a successful team, you not only need to look at the functions that you're trying to fill, but you also need to look at how you can bring in people that bring in a diversity of skill sets, of personalities, of different things they look at in life, and whether you're based if you're a global company, I'll put it that way, also where you bring in people from other parts of the world, so you don't end up with all the same mindset from that standpoint. And I would say for every leader standpoint, although it sounds like it would be what you want, it's exactly don't think you want. If you look around the room and they all look like you and think like you and talk like you, you're never going to be successful as a team.
Good point. All right, we've got another question here, Lew. How do you research and make sure you are engaging with the culturally appropriate marketing? Is there a whole team for it? And how does a small business without research get that info?
Yeah, there's if you're a small or medium or large company, the good news today is that there's a lot of social listening that can be done, and it doesn't have to be really expensive. So I would say, look for somebody that does monitoring from that standpoint, or can monitor your social media feeds from that end. So I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, it's my company, so I want to read every time somebody posts something on Facebook about me, or I want to post read every email that comes in. But I think what you need to do is do some social, have somebody that can aggregate your social listening and then give you back some feedback. Again, if you're fortunate enough to be big enough to be able to do it internally, then you could certainly hire, a junior level, digital asset person that can pull down the content for you. But I think the other thing too is to make sure that the appropriate people in your business, or you, if you're the owner, actually read some of the comments. Because I think sometimes what I've seen in some situations, especially in a medium or large company, the people in the decision making know it's happening, but it's almost like, no, I don't really want to, just tell me, but sometimes it's a lot different when you have to, from personally doing it myself for years, when you have to actually read that email about where you fell down as a company. Because let's be honest, unfortunately, most people write you when they're not happy, then tell you that you've done something right. That's human nature, I think, everywhere in the world. So when you have to actually really read it and think about, wow, did we really miss the mark by that much, type of thing? From that standpoint, then I think it's really awakening. But there are tools out there, and again, it's not, and if you have some digital experience yourself, there's some tools out there too where we could follow up, I could get you some information. But there's some digital tools out there where you can almost with yourself in your own Google account or your own Instagram or Facebook account, do some aggregate work yourself from that standpoint. So you could see what people are talking about you and then what you want to potentially do about it or not. So sometimes not doing anything is the correct answer for the question.
Right. So you're known to play offense in business, and one of the strengths of yours is turning around underperforming businesses for long-term growth. when you landed in Europe and you knew you had to make this thing profitable, what was the mindset going in, and what are like maybe some like metrics you set up for yourself in order to start the ball moving? And then when did you realize that thing like where was the tipping point where you realized you had hit success and things were going to work over there?
Okay. I think I'll answer that two ways. So I'll
Okay.
talk about the first time I went there in 1994. And then actually the second time when I came back from Australia in 2010 was actually probably a more pivotal time for our global organization. But
Okay.
the first time I went over, I think the mindset change, again, as you would expect, the advantage of being in the athletic industry, you have a lot of people who have been involved in sports. So,
Right.
and they whether it's soccer, whether it's American football, whether it's rugby, whether they swam or played tennis, you even have people working for you that might have been Olympic athletes within their country, and in a sport that's, let's say, not as prevalent as like a basketball player or a soccer player is today. But you have a lot of people that are culturally want to win or have it in their personality. Hey, look, I want to win.
Mm.
So I think the first thing we established was the fact that, hey, that we want to win. But from a sales organization standpoint, we want to win on the top line and the bottom line, because it's always easy if you're a retailer, it's always easy to win on the top line. I can certainly motivate you today to buy a pair of shoes, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
It may not make me any money on the bottom line, but I could certainly, so the issue is we need to be able to do both. And then we need to be able to be focused enough to make it happen. So the end of the first year I was there, we had a tipping point moment. So we're going to have this balancing act between being promotional after Christmas and not being promotional, because in Europe it's a big deal. So Boxing Day in the UK is an example, and because the countries even more so back then, but even now, are regulated on when you can actually go on sale. It's not like the US where you could be on sale every day.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to do this balancing act. We were really on the fine line of, would we make a profit for the first year or not? And we went back and forth on the dynamics of how much we could drive on the top line and how much it was going to cost us markdown wise, so we can then hit the bottom line.
Okay.
And we ended up as an executive group with really almost a 50-50 split. So you had the group around me saying, yes, drive that top line to that extent. With that markdown level, we're going to be fine. Mm-hmm. And you had the head of planning and the CFO going, oh no, we're never going to get there. We're going to lose it from that standpoint. So the president at the time of Europe believed in my side of the equation, and fortunately it worked from that end. But again, that was also a tipping point moment, because then the organization, the entire organization, office-based and field-based, realized we can be profitable and we can win. And that was a mindset change that went from, well, they bought us a couple of years ago. When we ever make money, what's going to happen?
Right.
When I came back from Europe, from Australia, and I came back to Europe in 2010. For the 4 years I was gone in Australia, the division had barely made any money, and the people working in the division, because the profits, our bonus plan is linked to a variety of metrics, but you don't, basically, if you're not hitting your bottom line number, you're not going to pay out a bonus. So for 4 years, those people hadn't even in the bonus. So when I came back, I don't want to underplay how hard they worked as a team and stuff, but we immediately won in 2010. Mm-hmm. The difference was when we started a plan for 2011, it was like, well, we're doing so well this year. We clearly can't do that well next year. We clearly have to slow ourselves down. It's like, no, that's not how it works, team. The idea is to build success upon success, not to have a successful year, to have a mediocre year and have a successful year. So, and again, the lion's share of the business believed in that, and you do things around it to promote it, to get them excited internally. I'm talking about now, and from a vendor standpoint too. When you're that's a nuance of FootLocker as well too. Is you don't build your own product, so you need to be. For as much as you do to motivate your team, you need to motivate your suppliers to make sure the product that you want to buy to then drive your top line and bottom line is made available to you. Because interestingly, from all my years in retail, the only retail segment in the marketplace that I'm aware of that competes for the opportunity to buy product is in athletic footwear and apparel.
Mm.
Like if, no one else I've ever talked to, whether you're as big as Walmart or as little as the mom and pop down the road, says, when I went to my supplier and I said I wanted to order 100,000 of whatever, that they said, no, I think you only need 50.
Yeah.
Because that normally doesn't happen, but that happens in the athletic industry. So you need to be as good marketing to your brand partners as you do to your internal team to get things moving in the right direction.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you're referring to your top line and bottom line, for what you guys were looking at, Lou, top line sales, bottom line profit, is that what you?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you do the same? Basically, apply those same methods when you went to Asia as well?
Yeah, but a little different thing. So we talked a little offline. So from an audience perspective, so the difference when we started to go in 2016 and 17, we started to look at the places when I was the head of international. We started to look at the places in the world where FootLocker wasn't playing. So at one point in the 90s, surprisingly of all time frame, we had some stores opened in Hong Kong and we had a couple stores in Tokyo. We also started to expand in Latin America. So we had Mexico and we had a few stores in a few other countries. But in both cases, we pulled out. So in the Mexico case, it was a devaluation of the peso. So we ran as fast as we could back across the border. And in Asia, the reality is the numbers that came in from the stores, although the sales numbers were very good, against the projections based on what the rent would cost and everything else, we pulled out. And in those particular days in the middle 90s, it was a very critical time for the Woolworth Company on whether we would be around or not to this day. So we pulled back. But those are the two parts in the world where FootLocker really doesn't play. And there is a strong part of the athletic industry. So our research showed us Asia was more aligned to where our consumer is from a price point standpoint and product mix. So we went into Asia. But there was a real challenge to my team, and it almost became apparent from day one. So we're going to Asia as the new guy. So it's not like we show up in town and there's nobody else selling athletic shoes and apparel. We're going to have to, fight for our share of the pie.
Right.
But because you're a startup, you're literally startup in all stages. We didn't have a service center, so we needed to coordinate a 3PL. We didn't have real estate in the marketplace, so we spent countless days convincing landlords that we were a viable option for his mall or a viable potential candidate for a downtown location we want to cook. So although they knew FootLocker, we weren't there. And their point of view was many a time was, well, what's the difference between you and the other three guys I already have? Why do I need another athletic store? But internally, the problem was that we were a very successful, mature business by the time we got to 2016. So high single digit profits to low double digits each year as a global organization. And you want to have this startup where you're going to lose money for 3 to 5 years. Well, yeah, that unfortunately, but again, we had a business model that said, this is how we go.
Right.
But everywhere along the way, it was constantly a struggle for a lot of my peer group at the the highest senior level table to understand that, hey, look, you really need to invest. Now, there was plenty of people that understood it as well.
Yeah.
But you can't, why do you need that marketing campaign when you open up your first stores in Malaysia? Well, because nobody necessarily might not know who we are. Oh no, we're FootLocker. Everybody knows who we are. No, maybe not as much as you think. That was a very interesting challenge for our gentleman named Thomas Peterson, who's the GM who runs Asia for us, as well as the head of our digital team that we sent down there from that standpoint to do the same thing, to cut across the marketplace. Because our goal when we opened in Asia was to open up multi-channel, to be able to have a e-commerce order at the same time we could have a consumer standing in a store. So David Miller had the same thing. And again, it's even interesting, even in the most forward-thinking people in our company, how many times you would have to still go back and pick them up and go, okay, now remember, it's not the same. So yes, David needs to hire, to increase his staff by 50%. Well, increasing his staff by 50% means he's going from 10 to 15 people. He's not going from 500 to 750. So,
right.
From that standpoint, but yeah, it was unique, from that standpoint. So, and probably at that stage of my career, I was, the good news was I was a lot more patient than I would have been maybe 20 years before that, to have the ongoing discussions with my peer group on the finance side to go, yeah, You're going to lose money for a couple of years, but you're going to make money. And the good news is we were on track. We didn't lose any more money than we thought. Actually, we did better.
Uh-huh.
And they will make money in the time frame we had planned now, based on you now have enough stores and have enough digital business to now lift the tide from that standpoint.
Right, that makes sense. I want to ask you. I know you were the VP of real estate in Europe for FootLocker, and what's FootLocker's play with their real estate division? Because I'm fascinated with, McDonald's is, the old adage isn't a hamburger company, it's a real estate company, because they own the best real estate on every corner in every country and city in the world. Is that I know, and then I know you guys are in pretty much every mall that I've ever been in, especially in North America for sure. Do you have a similar play to McDonald's in that respect, or what's the mindset behind real estate with FootLocker?
Well, today, unfortunately, I think in most cases we're just the tenant or the lessee from that standpoint. There was a point in the Woolworth days where the real estate group was a profit center. In fact, for quite a few years, Woolworth made quite a bit of money by selling property when it got to the point where they didn't see it as a viable alternative anymore. Mm-hmm. We're really the real estate play. So the play for us on the real estate side of things, but it's interesting because it's a really serious play in North America right now, based on even before COVID, but since COVID from that standpoint, is to decide whether you stay in the mall and pay the rent that the mall developer wants to charge you, or can you rotate outside the mall to a freestanding or a strip center location and maintain your presence in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And FootLocker, we moved in on that strategy years ago. So actually, back in 2015 and 16, we realized we needed to make this pivot in some situations, because some of the best malls for the athletic industry, which are clearly not the best malls for all forms of retail, but for the athletic industry, are C and D malls, and many of them weren't going to survive.
What do you mean by the C and D malls?
Higher occupancy rates or vacancy rates, excuse me. Lower, average volume for the typical tenant in the mall. Okay. So, like in a city, let's take. I'll use Houston as an example. So, if Houston has 15 malls, there's going to be 5 really great, unbelievable brass and glass malls. There'll be some in the middle, and then there'll be the bottom 3 or 4.
Gotcha.
Well, the athletic industry, because it plays very well to a urban or a minority-based consumer, mm-hmm. tends to play really well in the lower end malls because it's closer to where that consumer lives from that standpoint. But it plays well across. Don't get me wrong. But so this pivot came up to look at where we needed to stay in North America and where we could actually go outside the mall and continue to serve the consumer. Whether that was a necessity because the mall was going to go away, but the consumer wasn't going to go away, mm-hmm. or because of it helped us more from a profitability standpoint. And the model we can always look at is, whereas in the U.S. we're probably 70 or 75% mall based. Internationally, we're probably only 30 or 35% mall based, because the international consumer still shops in their downtowns. Yeah. Even though the mall exists from that standpoint. So, and it's the same thing across Asia and Australia and New Zealand as well. You have malls, but you have your downtown or CBD locations that are very viable. So you have that. You have a success story that says, okay, look, you could come outside the mall and be successful. Your real estate team then needs to figure out where the pivot should happen and how you can make the pivot happen from that standpoint. And there are some really good examples in Detroit, in Baltimore, actually in Houston, in LA, where some of the malls that were very, very good to the consumer that plays in our channel went away. Mm-hmm. The stores in now a strip center or a freestanding location have continued to serve that consumer, and we can be community based from that standpoint and stay there, because that consumer is just, it's not fair to them to say, well, you need now to go 30 minutes on the subway or take 2 buses to get to the other mall or whatever, when it used to be able to, 5 minutes from where you live, be able to get what you need, or take your family, from that standpoint, 1 bus stop from where you live and not across town. So,
yeah. So it sounds like it's giving you much more flexibility these days. If a mall does go under, that you don't own the property, you can just But for the downtown areas, do you guys do you try to buy those locations, or Are you still leasing, or is it's just not your focus now? Or
Well, yeah, right now I'd say it's not our focus. We've had several discussions about it over the course of the last 10 years. I'd have to tell you that I would have advocated in select situations that we actually bought the property, but we decided not to go back into that from that standpoint. I mean, there's obviously pros and cons
mm-hmm,
when you have the asset on your balance sheet or you don't have the asset on your balance sheet, or the liability, depending on how the asset's valued from that standpoint.
mm-hmm,
The only properties that we really own in most cases. They would be in the U.S. or outside the U.S. We own several of the office buildings we operate in. From our standpoint, we own our service center in Junction City, Kansas. We own our service center in Hyen in the Netherlands.
mm-hmm.
In other places, we use 3PLs. We own a facility in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, which serves as a hub for moving product in the east part of the United States, but also has a basis for our financial and our IT organization. So there's not a lot of retail property, and in the U.S. I wouldn't see it being. It's not really that common. Even in the downtown locations, you certainly could find a mom or pop type of home building. You might be able to. Internationally, it is much more prevalent because you have so many more stores that aren't in malls.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been a couple situations where I actually advocated that we buy the property versus lease it, but the internal evaluations that they felt again there was more risk than there was reward, so continue to be the tenant, let someone else go after the property from that standpoint. But there's no doubt that that there is money to be made, or to have control of the building is not a bad thing, depending on what the business is and how well you can utilize the property from that standpoint, or what the other tenants might be. So internationally, or even in the U.S. in a downtown location, you clearly would have retail on the ground floor or maybe the first floor, but then you'd have offices or apartments above you. So again, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but our real estate team is focused on managing the relationship between us and the landlord, and not necessarily managing the property anymore from that standpoint.
Yeah, makes sense. Another question from our listeners, Lew. I'd like to know more about how Lew organizes all of the data he needs to absorb so he can make the best informed decisions as possible. I've experienced issues with when I'm working through and with people, having a clear understanding of where they are in the process and systems we have built and what we are producing.
Okay. Well, there's two sides to that. So there's the internal amount of data you get, and then externally in today's world where everything moves so fast. So I'll do the external one first. So what I found for myself over time is I set up Google searches, in particular, either brands or subject matter that pulls down stuff and basically puts it in front of me every day. And then I could go in and look at what I need in a consolidated format for that time. Because otherwise you could just spend the entire day looking at your screen and never get up off the chair. Yeah. But that really helps me. I also subscribe to a couple. I mean, there's dozens of different, even in the athletic industry, there's dozens of different, whether it's SGI, whether it's a variety of formats that dump in information every day or every week. So again, I try to consolidate down a group of information that I can really understand what's going on in the marketplace around me from that standpoint, from a business perspective. Some of it, again, would be real estate related, interestingly, because you need to know what's going on in the marketplace. A lot of it's around what the brands are doing that you would sell in your store for a FootLocker store, and some of it's other things within the industry. Internally, the best way I found to continue to make sure you're engaged and you have that dialogue and you have a chance to absorb what's going on is a couple things for me. So I believe in touch base meetings with my direct reports on a weekly or a biweekly basis, depending on their area of the business and what's going on. I also try to make time every week to sit in on meetings within the functional areas of the business as part of the audience. Now, sometimes that's difficult because you drop in the meeting as the CEO is as an example, and it could redirect the entire meeting. But when you start to do it on a regular basis, then it doesn't become a surprise like, oh, why is he here type of thing. It's just like, okay, it's our turn, or it's, he hasn't been here for a while type of thing. And a lot of times when you can jump, even if you can't sit through the whole meeting, so if the meeting's scheduled for 2 hours and you can only block an hour of your schedule, or if it's scheduled for an hour and you can only block 30 minutes, you'd be surprised what you learn and what you pick up along the way. And obviously you pick and choose. The one thing we've always made sure in the divisions that I've been involved with is that we have a pretty robust and accurate corporate calendar. So again, I can see where those meetings are and when they're going to take place. So, what building, what meeting room, or in today's world, what Zoom link that I need to hit to be able to attend. But I think getting involved in those meetings and hearing things sometimes yourself firsthand, you could come back out of it and have a whole different perception when you go back to then talk to your team. And it doesn't have to be a problem here. I think the other thing too is I think we too often run to where the smoke and fire is. And not spend the amount of time on what is right, what is working, and how you potentially can accelerate that from that standpoint. So I think balance between where you go and where you don't go. And today, until the world goes back to whatever the new normal is, because a lot of these meetings are on Zoom. You could jump in right away. So it's not like, for example, if I'm sitting in Beyond in the Netherlands, which is our European headquarters, and the meeting's happening in New York. What's the timetable? Does it work for me? Can I get there or not? But, but prior to COVID, you'd be the odd one in. Okay, can somebody make sure there's video equipment in the room so I can attend? Where now it's like, okay, everybody else is on Zoom too. So, okay, I'm just going to, I'll jump into the meeting and, see what's going on. But I think you have to make sure that for as busy as your personal schedule is, whether you're the entrepreneur owner of a business or leading a team, that you make time to get into the different segments of your business or your team and participate. And then I think also the challenges that we talked about earlier is when you go in, try to listen more than you do talk.
Yeah, that's a good one. What do you do to as an executive for so many years, Lew? Like, you've got to keep a healthy mindset. You've got to keep stay in the right state of mind. You've got to keep a healthy body as well to keep going for all these years. What are some of your regular habits that keeps you on par so you can be an A player, you can be in that go-getter for so long over an extended period of time?
So again, this is another one of the things I learned in that first trip to Europe in the 90s, and then the other trips internationally, which is I think internationally, international business leaders have a much better understanding of work-life balance. Now, part of that's because their vacation time is dramatically more. I mean, as an American, you typically get hired. You're lucky if you get 2 weeks vacation, and internationally, you immediately start off with 4 or 5. But take that to the side. I think that the first thing is that you and I really push this with my my direct reports and even the layers below that is you need to take time, and you need to take time away from the business. So if you're on vacation and you're sending me emails, I'm probably calling you up and asking you to put your computer away. You have to give yourself a break. Otherwise you lose any type of peripheral vision because you're in a tunnel. You're looking at the same thing day in and day out. You need to take a step away. If you're fortunate enough that you have enough vacation time that at least one time a year you can take 10 days or 2 weeks off, that's probably the best thing you could ever do. Because I think for most of us, it's by the end of that first week's vacation that you actually start to feel like you're on vacation. Yeah. So you need a few more days to actually rewind from that standpoint. And again, I think look, we're all reachable all the time, especially if you own the business or you're in a really senior leadership role. And what I try to do is I try to establish with my team when I was taking a break that, look, if it's an emergency and you really need me, call me. Don't count on me reading the emails every day. Don't wait for me to respond. If you really need me, call me. Otherwise, when I have a chance, I'm on vacation and it's raining and we're stuck in the hotel for a week or something, I might log on and knock off a few emails. But I think first of all is that when you do get a chance, and make sure you do force yourself to have a chance every year, disconnect. Yeah. The other thing is I think you need to have commitments for your time outside of work. That's the way I would put it. So I think too often, you say, well, I'm going to go to the gym, but that's not really a commitment. So if you're fortunate enough to have children, then you can make yourself have a commitment. So my commitment to my first two sons and my youngest one now is that I'll be involved, which is easy for me. I'll be involved in sports. So I coach one of their teams, which means I have to have time at night a couple times a week. I have to make time on the weekend to show up to coach the games. Other people will do other things to be, maybe your child's involved in Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts and you can link in there, or they have some other kind of hobby, whatever it might be. It could be, it could be programming. It could be a variety of different things where you can take the same class as they are. But that disconnect also from work, because you're forced to, also helps you clear your mind as well too from that standpoint. So I exercise on a regular basis, but that's never been the release for me. Although I know for some of my best friends it is that, hour in the morning in the gym or, running to prep to get ready for a half marathon or something is their release from that standpoint. Where I've used other things, but I think you have to, for most of us, I think that are very, and especially if it was my own money, if I was an entrepreneur running a business, then if you don't force yourself to have an obligation, I think that's the best word, obligation outside of your work, you're not gonna disconnect. And if you don't disconnect, you have the real risk of, as I said earlier, is that you're only seeing things in a tunnel. You don't have enough time to realize what you're missing and how much what you're missing is affecting you.
That and another thing I've noticed is a person's self-confidence that never takes time off. Self-confidence is so wrapped up into their business or their job that if something changes or if the business is down or up, then they're depressed or they're happy just based on the business. Where if you have outside hobbies or time outside of whatever your profession is, then you can balance that, because you may have a bad day at work, but you go play softball with your friends or go coach Little League or something. It's really enjoyable. So you can kind of maintain it. It makes sense.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. From an ego standpoint, if you're the leader of a big team or the owner of a company, and people spend a lot of time telling you, you're great or whatever, and you have to filter that. But you coach a bunch of 7 or 8 year olds, boy, they really tell you that you're not, you don't know everything every day.
Unfiltered feedback
changes your entire perception of how to motivate somebody and what you can, the things you learn from working with kids or from people outside your job from that standpoint.
Yeah, it makes sense. How about your sleep schedule, Lou? What type of sleep schedule do you keep?
I generally try to get 6 or 7 hours a night. I don't really need. I'm one of those people that starts on the early side of the business, the day from that standpoint. So when I was working full time, both in Vianen or commuting into New York, back in New York, I would generally get up between 5 and 5:30 and try to be in the office a little bit after 7 in the morning. I always looked at that time. I would always try to get in the office half an hour to an hour before the rest of the population comes in, because I always felt I needed that time to prep for the day. But from a sleep standpoint, I generally try to get 6 or 7 hours, and I generally can even do it when we travel. I'm fortunate with all the traveling I've done for all these years. I make the time change, fairly quickly from that standpoint, so it doesn't kill me for that. And the other big advantage if you travel as far as to Asia from the U.S. or from Asia from Europe is I can sleep on the plane. So I think that's one. Without the help of a drug, I can actually get some sleep on the plane, which allows you to land and then go. Because again, when and for all of us to travel internationally, I'm sure you have everyone has plenty of experiences. When you land, the people you're coming to see don't expect to say, well, okay, now he's going to take a whole day to get used to it. They're pretty much ready to go.
Exactly.
So you need to hit the ground going, okay, I'm here. The only reason I'm here is to help you, so I need to be ready to work to help you from that standpoint. So
yeah. What do you think entrepreneurs are missing when it comes to like underperforming businesses? Like say somebody's got their company or an asset within their company and it's underperforming. What would you say? What would you recommend them the first few initial steps to take in order to turn things around?
It's always, again, when it's your own thing, your own business, especially, or it could be, I could even say from my experience, when it's my team, I think sometimes we have to almost, move to the side and realize, okay, like I'm not evaluating the person. It's not an extension of me if it's not successful. So from that standpoint, and really be able to evaluate it. What I always do is I go back to what the original strategy was and what the original purpose was. So, we thought this is what we said we wanted to accomplish. This is the time frame we wanted to do it. This was the assets, both whether it's personnel or funding we want to put in there. And if we're not where we needed to be, then is the problem us, or is the problem that we were just off from a strategic standpoint? So I think, and then you pull people in and brief them the same way. Look, this is not about what anybody did wrong. This is not about anything. It's it's not about the person. It's about what we thought we could do and how we can get it done or not, and then evaluate. And then I think the hardest part then is to potentially realize, especially I'll say for myself personally, is to potentially realize that, hey, I can't fix this. It's not going to work, and it's not viable. And then the question is it better operating with someone else, or is it a business that we thought we could make successful, we can't, and we need to exit? And to me, that was always a personal problem. So to be able to admit defeat, but you eventually need to have a lot less, on the negative side, and a lot more things that you've won at. But sometimes you have to admit that it's not the right play. And if it was, and I think it's the same for whether you're a big company or it's an individual owner, is you need to be honest with yourself and make those decisions before the hole gets deeper and deeper from that standpoint. Because the reality is, in some cases, you could exit before it's that dramatically affected to your overall business. So I don't really like to use some of the current buzzwords in the IT world, but in this one's case, I would agree. You need to realize you need to fail fast and then move on, before you jeopardize the rest of the business around you on something that you did that was wrong. And it's happened for us. I mean, I was really a big advocate of us buying, when I ran FootLocker Europe and internationally, about us buying two retail chains in Germany called Runners Point and Sidestep. One would offer us a vehicle in a performance category that we don't play at in Europe, performance running, not just casual footwear. And Sidestep was a very unique model because it was more female based than male based, and again, that's against FootLocker as well too. And I was convinced they were going to work. Well, we eventually had to shut down Runners Point because it just didn't work out. And the problem there was, and I can say this honestly, is that our two most important brands in the athletic world, Nike and Adidas, changed their strategy about the product they were making available to Runners Point. And for basically trying to make Runners Point work for about a year without the right product to serve those consumers, we eventually had to say, look, it doesn't matter. We could spend the next 5 years at this, and the reality is we're not going to change Nike or Adidas changed in their distribution model. There's nothing that tells us they're going to reverse. So we have to, admit that this is not going to work, and make those moves from that standpoint.
If you could, and maybe you could, that kind of piggybacks back into this, but if you could define how you see leadership in a few sentences, Lew, what would that definition be?
It's tough with a few sentences, but let me try it this way. I'll talk about there's three things that I felt that were instrumental in my ability to be a leader, and the things that I hope those other leaders that I've mentored has taken away and used. And actually, there are three. So the first one is, and you kind of mentioned earlier, is I believe you have to play offense. You have to be aggressive. You have to find ways to win. When I say aggressive, I don't mean you trample somebody or you trash talk your competition, but you need to realize that there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers. And if you want to be a winner, you have to want to play. I think there's a soccer analogy that works the best internationally, which is, we need to find a way to win. We don't need to play not to lose. So we're not going to put 10 players in front of the goalie and hope that we end up with a 0-0 tie. You need to take calculated risks, but in short term, play offense, be aggressive. The second one is excellence and execution. I think too often we think about execution in a lot of different ways in business, but execution means that we have a pride in what we do and how we do it. So whether you're the owner of a company, the CEO, or the receptionist that comes in, across the business, there has to be a pride in what you're doing. And there has to be a core value that says, look, what we do, doing it with as much excellence as we can is important. And
Yeah.
I think it establishes a culture, especially as an example, in a business or an industry that has to rely on external parties to help you be successful. Because if you can demonstrate excellence in execution, the people that you rely on or the businesses you work back and forth with say, well, okay, well, if they do it, then they could certainly ask us to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing is, because everything, again, to my standpoint, is you're only as successful as the people that you bring in or the people you were able to keep and surround yourself with. Is that you treat each other with dignity and respect. Whether that's your internal employees and fellow colleagues or your external partners that you're doing business with. No matter whether it's a contractor building a store who's not doing it well, or a big brand like Nike, whatever. That dignity and respect, I think, goes a long way, so that when you do have to have a negative conversation, it carries a lot of value. It's not just the only time you ever talk to me is when you yell at me type of thing. So from that standpoint, you want to make sure you have a good balance. And fortunately for me, those are the three things that, that I've said from day one. So whether I needed a translator to put it in another language or saying it in English, from that standpoint, that I think are important. And again, I realize today's employees are a lot different. The marketplace is a lot different today than it was 40 years ago when I started. But there are some things that don't age out from that standpoint.
What are you doing nowadays, Lou? Are you still involved with the company, or are you full on retirement? What's life look like?
Well, I've had an opportunity to do quite a bit of consulting, but in the consulting world today, it's a lot different. It's a 1 or 2 hour call because nobody's in their office or nobody's flying you around the world to it. So, and I've had some really interesting opportunities there to not talk just about the athletic industry or FootLocker or Nike, but to talk about leadership skills, to talk about business in Europe, a lot about Asia, because you have a lot of American and European companies rather trying to make it in Asia, and unfortunately, a lot of them don't make it from that standpoint because of not being able to adjust. So that's really interesting. I took, before I retired, I took a non-political appointment by the mayor of the Westfield, New Jersey I live in. So Westfield has a pretty vibrant downtown area, and they have what's called a Downtown Westfield Corporation, or a central business district that actually manages the downtown, has a very substantial budget of 7 figures. So I'm the vice chair of that group. So that keeps me pretty busy. And then my forced step to the side situation is I coach my son's travel soccer team, and I'm on the board there. My FootLocker situation, I haven't even been gone a year in August, but I have a couple offers to go on to paying jobs as on the board of directors. I need to clear the August standpoint. I'm probably going to show up on one of the boards, one of the athletic suppliers globally, and then another retail organization in the U.S. It's not athletic based, but still sits on that fringe of youth fashion. I'll say that from that standpoint. So got to clear it from that standpoint. So
What do you think you would have done if FootLocker wasn't in your life?
It's a good question. I think I probably could have gone either one of two ways. I think I would have tried to find a way to work with kids, whether that would have been through coaching or teaching, because I've always enjoyed that part of it. And it's interesting, as you get to be in your 50s and 60s, technically you're 20 and 30-year-old startups are like your kids from that standpoint, but okay, it's a little different, a little different relationship. But I would have wanted done something there, or if I stayed in business, I probably would have looked for another similar model to what FootLocker has from that standpoint. So I would have probably looked at something in the management area that I could grow. It may not have been in retail, but I think that the most important thing to me when I was first starting out is that I didn't necessarily think I would get to the level I was at, but I clearly, from a personality standpoint, had aspirations that it's not about the job I'm taking. There needs to be, I see myself at some point somewhere else within the organization from that standpoint. So, and whether that's, vertical or diagonally from where I start, I would have looked at it from that end. So, but I think the first play would have been towards something to affect youth from that standpoint. I think that it's interesting because the core consumer for the athletic industry is 16 to 24 years old. So you're in a very pivotal point of their lives. And that's a lot of your employees too, let's be honest, because retail is very dominated by part-time people working in high school or college. And then you have the percentage of full-time jobs. And then I've always been involved in sports. So my two older sons are now in their 30s. I was involved with their teams or their clubs. That would have been soccer, basketball, baseball from that standpoint. Same thing internationally. So I've coached youth teams in both soccer and in baseball, because Netherlands has a really strong baseball program at the time as well too.
I think we're going to wrap up there, Lew. Any final parting words of wisdom you'd like to share for our listeners?
I think the only, I guess I would part with this, be smart enough to realize there is still plenty you can learn every day, no matter how much of an expert you are in your company or your business. And as you then deploy that idea, search for what you can, where and when and how you can continue to learn and grow. So whether that's written materials, whether that's conferences you can attend, whether that's listening to your consumer or your employees on a regular basis, but really be smart enough to realize that no matter how high up on the intelligence level you are in your business, there's still a lot for you to learn. Unfortunately, I've seen most companies that aren't successful be more about ego than is about strategy or execution.
Absolutely. Very, very true. Lew, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all your tips and tricks and wisdom with us. We really appreciate it. Your career is fascinating to me. So thank you so much for taking your time and sharing with us today.
Thank you. My pleasure, Chris. Thanks for the invitation and the opportunity to speak with you today.
And listeners, we're going to wrap up there. Thank you guys for tuning in once again, and we'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye, everybody.